What's going on, man? Welcome back to the basement. I'm Ron, and today we're going to get into my top must-start and must-sit wide receivers for Week 4. Now, before we get into that, make sure you go down below, subscribe, leave a like. We're going to be making videos like this daily from now until the end of the fantasy football season when we're winning our championships. Christmas time, Week 17. I'm not sure when that even comes around, but let's not waste any more time. Let's go.
Foolies glad I'm home. Even my haters kinda glad I'm on. Rest in peace to my vagabond. Rapper, song, singer, suspended, subpoena.
For our first must-start wide receiver, we're going to talk about the must-start of the week in DJ Moore at Dallas. This is a guy that we were high on for his talent in the offseason, and he has shown that, he is a bona fide stud. I was comparing him to Stephon Diggs, early career Stephon Diggs. He feels like early career Stephon Diggs. He just had 12 targets in a game, 8 catches, 126 yards, 20.5 PPR points last week on that Thursday night game. He looks amazing. 30% target share, 10th in points per game. He is the, that true alpha in this passing game. And last year we saw DJ Moore in this role where he was more of this true deep threat. He was a deep threat. Robbie Anderson was operating as the X wide receiver with like a 26% target share. It was a little bit weird how they utilized their weapons, but now this year, Joe Brady decided, okay, DJ Moore's our X. Robbie Anderson will be our flanker, go on the deep routes, and DJ Moore has looked great. And there's nothing, extremely juicy about this matchup in Dallas. It's one of the higher over-unders at a 50.5 point over-under. But I think what really puts a cherry on top is Dan Arnold and Christian McCaffrey being gone. Of course, Dan Arnold got traded. McCaffrey has an injury he's dealing with. And with those targets going away, with those targets not being accounted for, I think DJ Moore could get even a little bit more of that slice of the pie. I think he's a fringe top 5 play this week in Dallas. Then we're going to talk about Allen Robinson at home against Detroit, and I have him on a roster. I'm going to be honest, hand up. I picked Allen Robinson over DeAndre Swift in a league. That was, of course, towards the end of the season when you could get DeAndre Swift in the 4th round, and my rule was I'm not drafting DeAndre Swift unless it's the 4th round. Let's load up on a wide receiver here. And he has absolutely been brutal. He's averaging 8.2 points per game as the wide receiver 70. He's had 2 different quarterbacks throwing him balls. He had Andy Dalton go down mid-game. Fields came in, threw only like 60 yards last week. It's been so tough for an Allen Robinson owner. It's not like you can trade him. Allen Robinson's in this area where he's done so bad through 3 weeks that you can't even get close to what you drafted him for, so you kind of just have to ride it out. And I think if there was ever a week to turn it around, here's the thing. After I say all that bad stuff about A-Rob, he is on this list. He is a must-start. If there was ever a week for him to turn it around, it would be at home against Detroit. He has the best advantage against opposing DBs this week on PFF. He has a 98 matchup advantage. That's excellent according to them. He is supposed to torch this secondary. I like him as a back-end wide receiver too that needs to be in your lineups. So just rock out. Just put him in there one more time, fellas. Then we have OBJ at Minnesota, and I loved what I saw from OBJ last week. He put up a team high in routes, a 29% target share, put up 5 catches for 77 yards and a blowout win, and he was used as a deep threat, which is really, really encouraging. He got 3 targets down the field because he's being used as a deep threat while also commanding a lot of targets, and that what we get from that is a really valuable, profile because he had 3 targets, 20 yards or more down the field, and they didn't connect, or I don't think that they all connected. Nothing connected for like a long touchdown at the very least, but those play action bombs in that Stefanski system are going to connect. Baker has looked really good this year, and that was only in his first game back. They're going to get the chemistry going. The expectations were low last week, but now we have game 2 of OBJ. I don't believe Jarvis Landry is going to be playing. OBJ is going to be the main alpha in this passing game, and the Vikings have been atrocious in their pass D. They have Patrick Peterson. They have, I think, Basad Breeland on the outside. Just really bad perimeter corners. I think OBJ torches them. They've allowed the 3rd most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. I have OBJ as another, back-end wide receiver 2 that should be in your lineup. Then let's talk about one last back-end wide receiver 2 that should be in your lineup. And it doesn't feel good. It feels slimy. It's not sexy. When you put Brandon Cooks in your lineup, it doesn't feel great. You don't put him in there and it's like, man, I can't wait to start Brandon Cooks, but you got to keep riding him. Pause. But he has been super hot. Even if his quarterback is Davis Mills, he's leading the league in target share. He's the wide receiver 6 in fantasy points per game. He has been an absolute stud. And he's a 16.5 point underdog against the Bills. And this is going to be a game like last week where we had like the Eagles against the Cowboys down 2 possessions all game. I think Miles Sanders only had like under 5 carries. He might have even had something crazy like only 2 carries. I think this could be a game for the Texans where we have something similar there where the Texans, maybe they only have, 10 to 15 rush attempts among their running backs, and they just have to, they're going to be behind all game. They're going to be airing it out, throwing a lot of pass attempts. Maybe not airing it out. Didn't look like Davis Mills was somebody that wanted to throw downfield a lot last week, but I think there's going to be so many targets to go around, and if Brandon Cooks maintains, his crazy number 1 in the league target share, then he's going to see a lot of targets. That's a lot of PPR points. Again, like him as a nice wide receiver 2 in this matchup when they're going to be playing from behind all game. On the flip side, we're going to be talking about our must-sits for this week, and the first wide receiver on this list is going to be Michael Pittman on the road against Miami, and Pittman's made me eat my words this year. He has looked great. In back-to-back weeks, he's had huge target numbers. He's had 12 targets in the past 2 weeks, and those are big boy target numbers. Those are alpha wide receiver in the NFL, dominating the target share type numbers, and I honestly wouldn't take anything away from him. I think that he's going to be a fine play rest of season, but this is a tough matchup against Miami. I don't think that he is a set it and forget it type guy this week, even though that I think a lot of people think that he is in that range of, back-end wide receiver 2, fringe wide receiver 2. He has a really tough matchup, and Byron Jones and Xavier Howard on the perimeter are the best cornerback duo in the NFL, and he has one of the worst wide receiver to cornerback advantages of the week on PFF, and he's not a complete fade for me. Like, if you have him and you have no other options, sure, play him in your flex, but I just want to say temper expectations. He's a fringe wide receiver 3 play for me this week as a boom-bust, flex type deal. And I think another player in that range of someone that's been really good recently that we should probably temper expectations on is going to be Christian Kirk. And Christian Kirk is going to be playing at LA against the Rams. He's the wide receiver 13 on the year, but this is a nightmare matchup for the guy. Jalen Ramsey hasn't shadowed anyone yet in 2021. He played the Cardinals last year twice. He never shadowed DeAndre Hopkins. And he's been playing a majority of his snaps in the slot. So if he's not going to be shadowing DeAndre Hopkins and he's going to be playing a lot of his snaps in the slot, Christian Kirk is going to have a tough day ahead of him. He's projected to see the majority of his snaps against Jalen Ramsey this week, which is just tough. And I think they're probably going to go away from Jalen Ramsey, probably going to be targeting more of DeAndre Hopkins, more of Rondale Moore in the flat. Christian Kirk might, Christian Kirk is always liable to, rip one off big and, score a long touchdown. But for me, he's a boomer bust wide receiver 4 at best this week, which then brings us to Marquez Callaway. And I think the box score last week on Callaway was misleading. He scored that touchdown where just like, who knows what was going on. You had Jameis Winston, doing his thing. I think backpedaled off his back foot, threw it up for grabs. I want to say Sean Payton yelled at him after the play. But Marquez Callaway scored that touchdown, and it kind of saved his fantasy week. He had 14.1 points, had his most catches, his most receiving yards. But if you look just at the box score stat and you look at those, it's like, okay, I think we can start, Marquez Callaway moving forward. I'd push back on that. He played under 50% of the snaps for the first time this season. He ran the least amount of routes that he's ever ran in this season. He ran only 12 routes, so he's not seeing a lot of usage. And he actually saw his worst usage of the season. That was his lowest snap share and his lowest routes run on week 3. Now, you can say, maybe it was game script related. Patriots were down a lot, but they had a good game script against Green Bay where they were up a lot, and he still saw more routes and snaps. So it's just something a little bit weird there. That seems like they're rotating a lot of these wide receivers, just trying to figure out if one of them can stick. And you could go out and say, maybe Marquez Callaway did great last week. They're going to play him back in. Even then, it seems like his ceiling is 17 routes and 60% of the snaps, which isn't enough. You want your wide receiver to run about like 28 to 30, 35 type routes, in that range. 25 plus is good, but 12 to 17 is a really low volume of routes for a wide receiver, and I hate this matchup. This is a quietly good pass defense on the Giants. As much as I hate the Giants, they're 0-3. They've been shitting on the Jets for years, but James Bradbury and Adoree Jackson have actually been quietly pretty good this year. I think that they're going to give him problems on the outside. I have Marquez Callaway as a fringe wide receiver 4 that should probably be left on your bench. The last wide receiver on this list is more of a fringe type guy, but I just want to say Devontae Parker at home against the Colts should probably be benched. Will Fuller is a big problem for him. He actually had Devontae Parker through 2 weeks looked pretty decent. He had a 23% target share. He was playing okay. That 23% target share went all the way down to a 14% target share. I think a lot of people are going to look at the stats. I think that he had 7 targets. He's had about 7 targets the last 3 weeks. Miami threw a lot last week. It was overtime. It was this weird game script that allowed for a lot of volume, but in terms of his actual slice of the pie, it was a lot smaller than it had been with Will Fuller in the lineup. He's outside of my top 48. If Will Fuller is playing, then Devontae Parker needs to be benched. If Will Fuller isn't playing, then Devontae Parker is probably a fine, fringe wide receiver 3 type play. That's going to do it for us today. Now, with these wide receiver videos, I don't know how to do them moving forward. I will say finding 5 sits and 5 starts is a lot because a lot of these guys are fringe plays. I don't know if maybe I should do, like 2 studs to kind of like be apprehensive about, give more flex plays. I don't know. I just want to have a little bit more variety. Let me know. Let me know if there's anything I can change about these start sit shows are still, I'm still tweaking them. Remember guys, this is my first time doing this like in season full time. I'm still trying to figure out, the ins and outs of how I want to do these videos. Now that we have a nice set schedule, we have a tight Monday through Sunday schedule. I'm just not sure how I want to do the start sit videos now. And I could also include tight ends in the wide receiver and just say, like they're pass catchers. So I don't know but that's going to do it for us today, man. As always, make sure you go down below, subscribe, leave a like. If you want the link to the full weekly rankings, I'm giving out so much value to the Patreon, fellas. I am out here doing a waiver wire article with fab guidance on Tuesdays. I'm doing rest of season rankings and weekly rankings. And then on top of that, Sundays, we are doing a live stream just for the patrons where I can answer trade advice, start sit questions, all that good stuff. So 4 really solid pieces of behind the scene content for $5 on Patreon, patreon.com/Ron Stewart. Now, with that being said, I will see you guys in the next one.
Yep. Juice, 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 juice. Yup. 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 Yup.